Good evening, everyone. My name is Scott Ashton. I'm the CEO of the Oceanside Chamber of Commerce, and I am very pleased to welcome you all here this evening. We have a great forum for you tonight, and we're excited to have you all here. Before I say anything else, I'd like to thank MiraCosta College for hosting us tonight. And yes, have a big round of applause. I do want to recognize some of the members of the Board of Trustees that are here with us this evening. Jackie Simon. Jackie. Bill Fisher. Frank Mershot. George McNeil. And the Board President, David Broad. At this time, I'd like to call David Broad up to say a few words.
Whoa. Well, I just want to say a very brief introduction and thank you and welcome to MiraCosta College. I'm particularly excited by this as our student government has been running a campaign on civic engagement. It's called Have a Voice, Make a Choice. And so you'll see a lot of students in the audience as well. So I just wanted to make a call out to them, welcome you all, welcome the candidates, and thank you for doing this. And we hope it will be a model of civic and civil engagement. So thank you and welcome.
Thank you, David. I do have a few more acknowledgments before I turn it over to our moderator. Just one housekeeping issue. The restrooms are right out this door to your right and then to the left. Again, I'd like to thank our co-hosts, MiraCosta College, Associated Student Government, and Kristen Hike, who is also, she's with MiraCosta College. And Kristen also serves on the board at the Chamber, so thank you for your leadership. The Oceanside Chamber's Business and Community Political Action Committee, the Vista Chamber of Commerce, Carlsbad Chamber, Encinitas Chamber, and the Vista Chamber, the Fallbrook Chamber. A special thanks to our sponsor for this evening, Genentech. We have some members from Genentech here. And I do want to acknowledge the members of our backpack in attendance with us this evening, Marva Bledsoe, Rick Wright and Debbie Allen, who are serving as our timers, Camo Gleesberg, Kevin Widowich, and David Neidiger, who will also be serving as our moderator. Kevin and Marva will be collecting questions. If you do have a question written on an index card, if you hold it up, one of the ASG members will pick them up from you and deliver them over to Kevin and Marva. So if you have those, please turn those in soon because we want to have a few minutes to organize our audience questions before we ask them. At this point, I'd like to introduce our moderator, David Neidiger. David served as the CEO of the Oceanside Chamber before me for about 18 years, and I had the pleasure of working for him. And now he works for me for free. So David is our moderator this evening, and give him a big welcome.
Thanks, Scott. Okay, we're all ready to go. This is a pretty important forum. We are talking to folks that are going to be representing us in Sacramento. And I do thank you all candidates for coming. We really appreciate this. This is really important. Like Scott said, my name is David Neidiger, and I'm here to keep us on schedule and on time. We should get out of here no later than 2:30 tomorrow morning. The 76th Assembly District covers an area from northwest the county of San Diego, northwest corner up at the Orange County border, goes down through Camp Pendleton, part of Fallbrook, all of Oceanside, Vista, Carlsbad, and Encinitas. So it's a pretty big area. In the 2010 census, there were over 420,000 residents in that county, so that's the number of folks that you will be representing. However, I'm sure by now that number is well over 500,000. Tonight we'll be asking questions to help you determine who's going to Sacramento. And now the rules of engagement. First, I will ask the help of Lindsay Tam. We'll be asking questions for you all. And the questions have been prepared by the Oceanside Chamber of Commerce Political Action Committee, from the Associated Student Governments, and also from the audience. So you'll each have 1 minute to answer each one of the questions. And we'll be starting with, well, we'll be starting with you, I guess, Tom, okay? We're starting going left to right, and then we'll rotate each question. So the first question, Tom will answer first, and we'll go right down the line. Next question, Phil, you'll be answering it first, and go right down the line, and we'll go around that way. So everybody gets a chance to answer one question first. And I'm going to be asking most of the questions will be asked of all of you. So I'll try to read it once or twice. If you'd like me to read it again later on, I will. But in the interest of time, we want to try to plow through these and not repeat the question every time, as we need to be. Okay. Our timekeepers are Debbie Allen and Rick Wright, right down here in the front row. Can't miss those guys. And when your 45 seconds of your 1 minute's up, you will see a yellow card. Okay. And then at the end of the time, you will hear. Okay. Is that loud? Do it again. Very good. You watching Breaking Bad or something? I'd ask you all to please exercise decorum, manners, and no interrupting, okay? And that includes the audience, too. We don't want anyone yelling out in the audience, no cheering, no applause, no hooting, no hollering, and don't throw anything at me. Oh, by the way, please turn off your ringers on your cell phones right now if you haven't done it. Now, we're going to spend 30 seconds. Each of you will have 30 seconds now, and we'd like you to introduce yourself and tell us why you're seeking to represent the 76th Assembly District. And let's begin. Why don't we begin with you, Tom?
We're tied down here, so I can't stand up, I guess.
Oh, you're tied down?
I think so.
Yeah, that's fine.
My name is Thomas Kraus. I'm a 47-year resident of California, 20-year resident of Carlsbad. I have over 25 years experience in finance, healthcare, education, and entrepreneurship, technology. I've been endorsed by the San Diego County Libertarian Party, the Veterans Party of America, State Senator Jeff Stone, former San Diego County Supervisor Pam Slater-Price, and former Oceanside Mayor Jim Wood.
Thank you. You'll probably see a yellow card at 30 seconds, okay?
I
20 at this time, everything else will be
Okay. 45. Okay. Yeah.
Good afternoon. My name is Phil Graham. Thank you for all for coming here today. I'm a San Diego native. I was born and raised here. I've lived in North County for over 20 years. My background's in tech and biotech. In fact, I lived overseas for 10 years in different countries. And when I came back home, the state that I left was not the same. We have some of the worst crime. We have some of the worst schools, unfortunately. We have the highest poverty rate. And we have some of the highest taxes in the country. So we have become an uncompetitive state, which is why so many people are leaving. And it also includes housing costs are out of control. So the reason why I believe I should be your leader in Sacramento is because I have the experience, I have the temperament to work with anybody, and the track record of getting things done. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Tasha Berner Horvath. I'm running for the 76th Assembly District to fight for a fairer, better, healthier world for all of us. I'm an Encinitas City Council member. I'm a former PTA leader. I'm a businesswoman and a mother. And I have the right combination of experience in government and the private sector, of temperament to bring people together to really get good things done for our district, and the track record, both in government and on the street, really making a difference in people's lives. I'd be honored to have your support and your vote on or before June 5th. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Amanda Rigby, and I'm a two-term councilwoman in the city of Vista. And I'm running for this assembly seat because I see our state in trouble. We have higher taxes, almost the highest in the country. We have business strangling regulations, and our quality of life has been ranked the lowest in the nation. And as a councilwoman, I've had experience in dealing with these very issues on the local level. I have a record of voting against tax increases and fees. I have a record of voting for reducing regulations, allowing our businesses to be more competitive. I will take this same advocacy and fight for the people of the 76th, just like I do for the people of the city of Vista. I'm honored to have you here tonight.
Hello, My name is Elizabeth Warren, and I'm a wife, mother, a lifelong journalist, and an activist and community advocate. I've spent 3 years of my life working on national organizing issues and bringing people together from the private and the public sector. I am focused on building stronger communities, a better quality of life for all of us, and giving some hope for tomorrow. I believe we need to invest in our state, our small businesses, our children, and our planet. I would be honored to represent you. Again, Elizabeth Warren. And if you want my endorsements and all that other stuff, my website is www.lizwarrenforc8.com. Thank you.
Wow, this is great. It's really exciting to be here tonight to share a little bit about who I am, what I believe, and why I know I'm the best candidate for District 76. I am Brian Wimmer. I reside in Oceanside. I work in information management for the defense industry. I have a lovely wife of 15 years who's also my very best friend who works for the U.S. Marine Corps in Camp Pendleton. I myself am a veteran, a successful business owner, and a community service volunteer. I'm solutions-oriented. Having worked for the Department of Defense and the U.S. Army, I understand that it takes a team to get things done. I've been tasked to solve many problems. I also believe in a government that is transparent and actually takes accountability for its actions. Thank you.
Thank you all. Much appreciated. Now we're going to be asking you questions from the Oceanside Chamber of Commerce Business and Political Action Committee. Let's start with you, Tom. We'll go right down the road, just as I mentioned. How do you weigh the interests of employers versus employees with regard to employment issues such as minimum wage, flex time, and family leave?
I weigh their interests from the perspective of its government's role, to the extent that it has a role in the relationship between employees and employers, to ensure fairness. But we have a free market, so the price and cost of labor is going to move depending on what the opportunities are and how productive people can be in any particular interest. What we want to be sure is that the individual person isn't at a disadvantage because a corporation has got lawyers on staff, and it's hard for an individual employee to get justice. I've worked in HR at 7 or 8 different firms, and we have issues sometimes when someone goes out on FMLA or has some other issue. This is a at-will employment state, and so it's important that the government provide opportunities for individuals to get recourse if they feel they've been discriminated against or in other ways treated unfairly. But at the end of the day, when it comes to, minimum wage is more of a federal issue. We have a state minimum wage, certainly, and I think if the free market was allowed to operate on itself, we'd have more efficient system.
Thank you.
I'm going to try to stand up too here like everybody else. I agree with what Thomas said. He's right. The problem is our state does not act like a free market system. The fact is our state government continues to burden our companies, both large and small, so that they can't succeed. I'll give you a couple examples. We talked about Genentech. The fact that our housing costs are so high in this state means that when Genentech tries to recruit people from other states to come here, they come here and say, I'd love to live in this beautiful town, but I can't afford the housing. The minimum wage, which is an artificial minimum wage put forth by the state government, is actually killing jobs and creating automated jobs in industries across California. So the fact is, our state government is not for the free market. They're for big government, which is really creating a big problem for everybody who tries to work and and have a good sense of living in our state. Thank you.
My name is Tasha Berner Horvath, and for much of my professional career, I worked for a global Fortune 500 company, and I worked in HR. So what I saw was companies of tomorrow are going to bring together workers and employers, and they're going to provide the best way forward by working together. And what we see is great companies coming forward, providing great jobs, providing great development opportunities, and those are the companies that are going to thrive not only today but of tomorrow. Where I think the government really has a role is providing affordable housing. And in Encinitas, we're working really hard to have more affordable housing, and we need to keep moving on this. I think the housing crisis in California is something that where the state can really come in and help. We also have to think about transportation and infrastructure. It's super important that especially our biotech sector has the water reliability that they need to make sure that the industry keeps thriving. So I think there's a lot we could do from the state, but I think, when we look at workers and we look at employers, the best companies of the future will be working together.
Sorry, I can't stand. I'm still a little tangled over here. But when we look at weighing the rights of the employees versus the rights of the employer, when we're talking about the different schedules and the benefits that we provide for our employees, I think that, again, over-regulation from the government is what has gotten some of these businesses into trouble and what is causing some of the economic problems that our businesses are having. I think that the businesses that are providing, and we have so many more nowadays than we did when I first entered the workforce 30 some years ago, we have so many more employee-friendly businesses nowadays. This is just the norm. This is what we expect as a society from the people that we work for, is we give them the freedom to run their businesses the way that they need to and provide for their employees. And if they are good companies, like the company my husband worked for 34 years, Motorola, they were an excellent company to work for because they provided the benefits and the flexibility to their employees. And any company that doesn't isn't going to have committed long-term employees. Thank you.
I'm going to try and stand. I don't think I have as far to go as everybody. This is really simple math, I think. When you pay people a living wage, they have money to spend in their local economies. Small businesses, and I believe so strongly in strengthening our communities, and that begins with supporting our small businesses, they need people to be able to spend money there. So we have to pay people money so that they have a living wage and a disposable income to buy things. The other thing is single-payer health care. I'm a big proponent of that because if employers don't have to worry about providing health care and workman's comp, they are going to save a fortune. And I can show you the math if anybody wants to see me afterwards, what this will do for our small businesses. Also, building homes close to jobs. If people can live and work in the same place, they're invested in their communities, literally and figuratively. We cut down on commuting time. That gives a better quality of life. Happy workers are more productive workers. We all benefit. Thank you.
Well, you know, as a business owner, as a guy that owned a company, I offered flex time to a lot of my employees, and I did have a family leave policy in effect with my company. It was at my discretion. I had several of my employees that had children and gave them enough time off that they were happy, productive employees when they came back. They were also encouraged to take as much time as they actually needed to actually take time with their husband or their spouse and enjoy the time that they had off. Flex time is something that I really approve of. Now that I am an employee with a large company, flex time is one of those things that I really appreciate. I mean, it's been around for over 50 years. In fact, it was pretty much invented in Germany. And it gave people a lot of opportunity to have a little bit less stringent policies when it came to punctuality. I mean, even in this state, as we try to get from one point A to another point B, we've got traffic issues. So it's nice to actually have that flex time to actually make up a little bit of that time if I'm coming in late. Thank you.
Thank you. Now for our second question, excuse me. This will be for you, Phil, to start. What is your plan to house Californians?
That's a great question. When I was brought up here, I was born and raised here. We had the best infrastructure. We had affordable housing. We had great paying jobs. We were environmental. And what's happened in the last 20 years is nothing short of horrible. The fact is, people are leaving. The middle class is being hollowed out because of taxes and regulations. Jobs are being squeezed. People aren't coming here to start jobs and start new companies. They're going to other states like Texas and Idaho. One of the problems is housing affordability. There was a study put out by Point Loma Nazarene College that said that 40% of the cost of building a new home is taxes and regulations. Okay, think about that. If you're going to build a home for somebody, 40% goes to taxes and regulations. Do you think that adds to the cost of homes? Absolutely it does. So the burden of the cost of the homes come directly from state government and city government. And until they understand this, that this cannot go on any further, and that we must reduce the regulations and taxes and costs of building a home, and also increase the supply of homes, we'll be sitting here 10 years from now arguing about the same thing. Thank you.
Good.
I think there's a lot we can do to address the housing crisis. As an Encinitas City Council member, I was formerly a planning commissioner, and it's hard in high land value areas to get affordable housing. That's just a reality. So what we can do, though, is we can incentivize housing that adds diversity. That means our seniors can have housing, and that means our millennials they may not want to have a large yard and a 4,500 square foot home. So what we can incentivize is granny flats accessory dwelling units, and we need to hold our cities and municipalities accountable for producing the housing, because we know it's hard to get housing through. I mean, just sit through any Encinitas City Council meeting any of these days, you'll see how hard it is. But we have to be bold, and we have to be strong, and we have to know that we are housing the future. Our future seniors, our future young professionals, our middle-class families. And that's from all income levels. So there's a lot we could do, but we need to make it doable. We need to reduce and streamline our processes where we can without sacrificing community involvement and environmental protection.
As a city councilwoman in Vista for the last 6 years, the housing costs have been something that we've had to deal with a lot in our community. And when that Point Loma Nazarene University study first came out a couple of years ago, I looked at that hard, and I've been working with our legislators and advocating in Sacramento, as well as regionally with the Building Industry Association, to try to address why almost half of the cost of housing is related directly back to fees, taxes, costs, regulations. So we've been trying to identify exactly where those costs are and how we can reduce them and how we can eliminate them. That's one of the first things that we need to look at when we're talking about the cost of housing in California, is the influence and the negative impact that government regulation has on it. But the other thing also is, as a community and as a councilwoman, we look at the types of housing that our community needs. It's not all farms and ranches. It's not all single-family homes. Sometimes it's going to be duplexes. We're working very hard to get additional senior housing. So we need to look at the entire inventory that we have, what we need to have, and how we can get that here while working to reduce regulations.
We need to think outside of the box. And I say that because a lot of people are living in boxes right now in this state. We need bridge housing for the homeless. That will solve a lot of problems. We also have the opportunity, I think, to work with developers and private industry and communities. If we can come together, bring all the stakeholders to sit down and have a conversation about this, we can solve this problem. The answer is yes, apartments, duplexes, condominiums, and single-family homes. We have to consider where are we going to put them. Walking communities are becoming very popular in metropolitan areas, and we have to take a look at, are we looking at more sprawl, which is going to cause more commuting and more carbon and make it more difficult, and then people are going to struggle to get to their jobs? No. We have to find a way to get people where the jobs are and jobs where the people are, and then have homes that can house every person. We can do this if we just have the political will, and a lot of it has to do with, yes, making sure that we have sensible regulations and not needless red tape, because I know San Diego's been trying to do this, and I went on a tour there. It took them 3 years just to get one project through. That's not sensible. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I pretty much agree with most everyone here tonight with regards to the regulations, the taxes, the fees. It's just unbelievable, the crisis that we're having with affordable housing in this state. It shouldn't be. I myself, I work as a volunteer at the Brother Benno Foundation here in Oceanside, and I've seen the struggle with many people just trying to make ends meet, trying to pay their rent. So it's not just affordable housing that's a real crisis, it's also the rents are continuing to rise. This is a major impediment for anybody that wants to live and work in the state. In fact, I have a lot of friends at the company I work for that, they're thinking about going back to their old state, wherever they came from on the East Coast, because they can't afford to actually have a nice house and enjoy a life here. It's unfortunate, but I also believe that we have to give our developers the opportunity to work alongside our zoning boards and collaborate, come up with some solutions. It's easy to put blame on any one organization or governmental regime, but let's come up with some solutions. Thank you.
The house that I grew up in, that my stepfather purchased when I was about 6 years old, is probably worth 25 times what he paid for it. Now, not too long ago, that would actually be a good thing, because the amount of equity created there is what allows a lot of people to go to college, because their parents take out loans against that equity. Or when their parents retire, they're able to sell the home, downsize, and pay for their care in their elder years so that their younger relatives don't have to. So when we talk about affordable housing, I think we need to be very clear about what we're actually talking about. We're running for a state office, so there are a lot of local activities that take place, like growth management plans and related climate action plans. And what's been going on in Sacramento is a whole lot of top-down, one-size-fits-all, sort of totalitarian, you're going to do this, that I completely disagree with. The best people who know how to manage their own communities are you in your community. And as a state legislator, I will do my best to let your local representatives, your county supervisors, your city councils listen to you, how you want to manage your local paradise.
Okay, Tasha, this question's for you. We'll start with you this time. Do you support the ballot measure to repeal the current gas tax?
So no, I don't support the ballot measure to appeal the current gas tax. Let's call it the Road Repair and Accountability Act, which is really what it is. I equate this to buying a house 30 years ago, and you knew at some point you were going to have to fix your roof. And somewhere along the lines, you needed to use that money to fix your plumbing. And it still means 30 years later, you still have that roof to fix. If we do not have roads and bridges and the infrastructure we need to get from A to B, we will have major costs for businesses, we'll have major delays and costs for individuals. So on the Encinitas City Council, we voted in a majority vote to support SB1, and I think most of the people on SANDAG, which is our regional association of governments, supports making sure that we have the infrastructure to support our communities and to support our businesses. And I think when you look at it, the individual costs of the Road Repair and Accountability Act are less than the actual costs of the individual damage to your car if we have potholes and damages to our roads.
I actually came out last year in a press conference in opposition of SB1, the gas tax. And I did that because we already paid a lot of money into this infrastructure that was diverted to other projects. Now, as a councilwoman, I know how much it costs to rebuild our roads, to repave the roads, build our sidewalks, make sure that our bridges are stable. I know what that means, and I know how important it is. That's one of the paramount responsibilities of your government, is to provide this infrastructure. But as a taxpayer and as a leader in my community whose job it is to look out for the taxpayer, I was opposed to having to pay that money a second time when we already paid it once, and our state officials in Sacramento took that money and used it for other things. They need to be held accountable. We all need to hold them accountable so that the money that is paid into that account for our roads and transportation funding is not diverted again. So that is why I oppose SB1. I don't want to pay a second time for what we already paid, and I think the voters have a right to have a say on this issue. So I support it going to the voters.
So I'm probably the only Democrat in California opposed to the gas tax, but I'll tell you why I do. We do need to fix those roads, and I agree that it's critical. We need to get from point A to point B. The thing is, it's where we get the money. We have, in fact, already appropriated it. And if we have to find it again somewhere, maybe because it wasn't properly allocated and now we've got a shortfall, I think we need to go somewhere besides people who have no choice but to commute. Small businesses who have to get their goods from one point to another. People who are working very hard, who say live in Escondido but are working in one of the coastal cities and have to commute every single day. We are nickel and diming working people and small businesses into poverty. And I think this is just another example of that. It's very easy to pass a tax because it's quick and it's a quick fix. And then we all just get it heaped on us, utility taxes, you name it. I think it's time we stop doing that and we start being responsible and looking more forward. Thank you.
So with regards to the gas tax, no, I am not for the gas tax. I'm actually, for repealing that gas tax because I do know a lot of folks out there that are struggling, whether they're middle class, hardworking folks, or lower class, low income folks. There are a lot of people struggling, and this gas tax is not going to do anything for them. So with regards to the infrastructure, yes, I'm definitely for infrastructure. Improving our infrastructure is very key, not only to our safety, but, for our future. But at the same time, we have a rainy day fund that's probably $15 billion overfunded right now. Why aren't we tapping into that rainy day fund? Why are we continuing to add taxes to everyone in this state? So we're not being accountable for where this money is going and where it's at right now. And I think there's a way that we could work with our legislatures, work with our assembly to essentially point out, look at the funds, and let's start using it to fix some of our roads right now. Thank you.
I very much support the repeal of the gas tax, and the car registration fee increase is also a terribly regressive tax on people who need to commute to relatively low-paying jobs. So going back to our discussion about affordable housing, the other half of that equation is how much disposable income do people have to pay for their housing. So if you want to solve the affordable housing problem, another way is to help people increase their incomes and reduce their expenses. With respect to what the money is actually being spent on, there's a chronic problem at the heart of the dysfunction of state government, which is they already have plenty of money collected through gas taxes to fix the roads, but they choose to spend it on other things like the high-speed rail. The state government has absolutely the worst record with respect to its infrastructure investments. You look at the money that they thought they saved by not maintaining the Orville Dam, the $25 to $50 million that they could have spent to keep it from collapsing. Not only did thousands of people almost die, it's going to cost us over $800 million now to fix it. If they had just done what they were supposed to do with the money they already had, we'd have $750 million to do something else with.
See how passionate people are about this issue? It's a real issue because it hits your pocketbooks. And it's the worst part about this tax, highest gas taxes in the entire country. It hurts the most vulnerable. It hurts the people who can't afford to live closer to where they work. Someone, maybe a single mother who lives in Vista, but has to work in Sorrento Valley. This gas tax hits her pocketbook, hits her quality of life. And the fact is the money that is coming from this gas tax is not going to the roads. It's going for a vanity project of Jerry Brown, the high-speed boondoggle train to nowhere. That's where it's going. So this tax is regressive. It hurts the most vulnerable. And did anybody know who Carl DeMaio is? So Carl DeMaio is the state leader who is leading the charge across the entire state to repeal this horrible tax. I am the only person on this stage who he has endorsed, and I'm very proud of that endorsement. Thank you.
Thank you very much. At this time, I'd like to do a quick back up a little bit. You got a chance to answer a question. Did everyone get one? Yeah. Okay. I get confused sometimes. We're going to have Lindsay Tam, who's the president of the Associated Student Government, is going to come up and give you guys some questions. Okay. I guess you'll be starting with Amanda. But while she's coming up, I want to make sure that the gentleman behind the camera is recognized. Mike Nolte has been at the MiraCosta College here for many, many years and head of the information services, and he's the one that's going to make you guys look good on television. Okay.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here today. ASG would like to ask the candidates, starting with Amanda Rigby, the following question. Do you support Senate Bill 54, a piece of legislation intended to maintain California's sanctuary status? And what steps do you intend to take to protect these sanctuary policies?
I do not support SB 54. And again, I came out publicly at a press conference last year in opposition to SB 54. Because SB 54 takes away the ability for local enforcement agencies to work in collaboration with our federal agencies to ensure that criminal aliens are not released back onto the street. And some of the criminal aliens that we have in our jails right now have a high recidivism rate when they reach the streets. So this policy is to make sure that the criminals, the rapists, the murderers, the chronic burglars, etc., are the ones that are not introduced onto our street. SB 54 does not have, like some people have contacted me in my community to ask, there's not having raids, etc., looking for the criminals. SB 54 would start that again because we're not having the relationship with the federal government that we had before. So I think if we get rid of SB 54 and bring our state back to where we were when we were working with the federal government to make sure that the criminal aliens were deported instead of released back onto our streets.
This comes down to something pretty simple. Having the federal government do what it's supposed to do and having the government in California do what we're supposed to do. I don't want to pay to fund ICE and Homeland Security. I'm already paying that with my federal tax dollars. Also, when we're talking about criminal elements, let's be clear. We're not talking about rapists and murderers. What we're talking about is protecting people who've been picked up for maybe shoplifting or a traffic infraction or something very minor that none of us would get deported for or even maybe thrown in jail for more than a couple of hours. Using that as a way to, essentially contact the federal government. All we're saying is we want folks to cooperate with the federal government, and we are, the sanctuary bill does not say don't cooperate. What it says is local law enforcement and private employers are not going to be contacting the federal government over minor things and creating a situation that wouldn't otherwise exist.
Look at the pause there. Well, I agree that, the federal government and local law enforcement should be working hand in glove to essentially assure the communities that their health and safety is assured. And what we've seen is that it's been politicized, that sanctuary cities will offer some sort of reprieve for those who are essentially illegal aliens. But this is not that kind of law at all. It's giving the criminals the opportunity to take a hold of people like you and me that are living in our communities and put us on edge as to whether or not our houses will be broken into, whether or not there will be criminal activity that we'll have to be aware of and be essentially alerted on. This should not be happening in our state. I mean, we've been working so well with the federal government across the board that it just does not make any sense to me, nor does it make any sense to many of the people that I know that are in law enforcement as to why we're just giving this up. And, quite frankly, the federal law preempts the state law with regards to this. So that's where we should go back to. Thank you.
This sanctuary state law is not only is it unconstitutional, it's just dysfunctional regardless of which side of the issue you are on with respect to larger immigration issues. So there are similar loopholes in the sanctuary state law, just like when they had the early release. So they'll say like, oh, well, if you're a violent felon, you're not going to qualify for the early release program. But if you look at some of the lists of crimes that aren't considered violent, it's like, forcible assault of a unconscious teenager, right, or domestic violence. So this does apply to very serious, normally common sense usage of the term violent criminal aliens. Now, it is no additional cost for a local sheriff or state jailer to simply notify the federal government that a person who's coming off of release for a crime like that is coming out on a certain day and a certain time, and they could come and be picked up. That's what we're talking about. This is not an unfunded federal mandate. But what you certainly don't want is you don't want these people released into the community where their friends and neighbors are going to get picked up when ICE comes looking for them.
Thank you. Thomas was right about clearing up a couple of things about the cost. That's not the issue. Let me clear up a couple more things about this. First of all, yes, I am against SB 54. It's illegal, it's dangerous, it's unconstitutional. On December 15, 1791, the 10th Amendment to the Constitution was passed. And the Supreme Court has verified this over and over and over again. The fact is, immigration and immigration law is the federal government's job. This is why you have immigration people at the border and at the airport. The fact is since January 1st of this year, over 300 criminals have been released back in our community. And not just people who are doing minor crimes. These are serious crimes, rape and drug trafficking and human trafficking. I think one person being released is too many. 300 is way too many. We need to repeal this law.
So I believe communities are safest when law enforcement and our communities are able to work together. And so at the beginning of last year, we started having ICE raids around schools in Encinitas. Families of American-born children were scared to bring their children to school. So I went to our sheriff's captain and I asked him, how does federal government work together with local law enforcement? And so what I was told was, actually, there shouldn't be raids around schools because there's a protected zone. And they want to make sure, regardless of immigration or documentation status, that if somebody is being has a case of domestic violence or being victimized, that they feel safe coming to our local law enforcement. So I feel when we are paying as cities for our local law enforcement, they should be protecting our communities from criminals, and the federal government should be doing their job, and that's what SB 54 does.
Our second question for the candidates, starting with Elizabeth Warren, is how do you intend to work with school districts to promote student safety?
Student safety is critical, but I do not believe that our teachers should be packing. Let's be clear about that. Teachers, principals, students, parents have always been the best guardians of our schools. And I think it's really important that we re-engage families in this conversation. This isn't about government sitting down and saying, okay, schools, this is what we're going to do and we're going to tell you to do. This is about moms and dads getting involved. And it goes to getting them involved in a way that is meaningful. If mom and dad are commuting all the time and they can't be around, we need to help them. We need to help families be nearer their schools, which means living where you work. And I know all this seems to work together, but that's a really critical thing. If parents can be more involved in their schools, they can work with teachers, principals, communities to keep it safer. Of course, law enforcement, yes. We also need to take these extra guns off the street that shouldn't be there in the first place and exercise responsible regulations when it comes to gun safety.
Law enforcement really should be engaged with our schools as much as possible. They should be given the tools necessary to work with our teachers, work with our leadership in the schools to make sure that everyone remains safe. With regards to the arming teachers, I think that was a good point. You know, I don't necessarily agree that that's the best way to go. I think that there are some cases, some scenarios, and some individuals that would be benefited to be armed, but they would have to be trained every month at the range. There would be tremendous liabilities associated with that school district, and it would quite frankly open up a Pandora's box. For every individual to know that teachers are armed, it makes them a target. And myself, being on the force protection end of things, I understand how to point out targets, how to find them. And so essentially, I don't think it's a good idea, but I do believe that having local law enforcement engaged on our campuses, in our schools, with our teachers, talking, networking is essential. Thank you.
So again, we're talking about a state level legislative position here. So on the one hand, this is very much a local issue. The local school boards and superintendents need to be given the freedom to craft a local solution for each individual school in their district based on the parameters and the characteristics of your local community. So whether maybe mental health is a bigger risk factor or maybe petty crimes and things of that nature, the local school boards need to be given both the flexibility and be held accountable. Now that said, from a state level, perhaps a state level crisis line, because individual schools and school districts probably can't handle the infrastructure costs of a statewide footprint program. Like I said, like a 24-hour crisis line for people to give tips if they think there's a student that has a mental health problem or is prone to violence or there's some other chronic security risk at a school. That's something that I think a reasonable program for the state to get involved with. If the state wants to authorize, let's say, former military personnel, if they happen to become teachers and they're qualified perhaps to carry a weapon, that's something that I'd consider.
So the two reasons that I've seen that have caused the problems over the past few years with school shootings in particular are a failure of law enforcement and our intelligence agencies to actually do their job. That's happened multiple times. It's really sad. And the second thing is allowing people who have mental health problems to have access to guns. This can't happen anymore, folks. And one of the ways we solve this is to make sure we have areas where we have enough beds for people who are sick who can be admitted and say, okay, you're going to have either 72 hours or even longer so we can evaluate them so they don't have access to these kind of firearms. Background checks work, but the fact is taking away guns from law-abiding citizens is not the answer. I think we need to also encourage that our school boards have unique and specific answers and ways of protecting their schools as they feel fit. If they want to have concealed carry on their concealed carry teachers on their school grounds, they should be able to do it with the right training.
So I'm a mom, and I got my start in politics actually trying to get in a stop sign. And obviously I was really good at stop signs, and I was asked to run for council. So school safety is something near and dear and close to my heart. Not only did I get in one stop sign, I got in two, so that's like really great. And so when we think about safety, there are many aspects of safety. So from a state perspective, we can increase funding for safe routes to school, because getting kids to and from school safely is equally as important as making sure that they're safe when they're at school. I sit on the school district liaison committee, and we just recently had a meeting where we brought together law enforcement, the school districts that are present in our city, as well as MiraCosta, the San Alejo campus, and our city to talk about what are the best practices. And I think our school districts already have safety plans. They're already doing that job. Their top mandate is to educate our children and keep them safe. So making sure that we're providing the transparency and accountability that all school districts are doing that, I think is something that is a perfectly legitimate state mandate, and I think that's something the schools will welcome.
Not too long ago, you might recall a shooting on the campus of UCLA. I'm a mom of 2 kids, and my son was just about to walk into that building as that shooting happened. I got a phone call from my son at that moment, just to let me know that he was okay and he wasn't one of the ones that was shot. And as a mom, I was terrified. He was in Los Angeles, I was in Vista, and I could not get to him fast enough. So I understand the feeling in that position for myself and for my family. And I think that as a city councilwoman, we try to work in unison, as Tasha said, with our school board for our safe route to school program for our kids. And as a city council, we create the sidewalks, we create the traffic lights, we create the zones to make sure our kids are safe in that respect. But safe on campus, we need to make sure that there's funding for our school districts to have the resources that they need to provide the programs and the security and the training for their personnel. And as your state legislator, I would do everything in my power to make sure that those resources are available.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. Those really great questions. Just a reminder, try not to clap too long, because like I said, now we're probably going to get out of here at 2:45 tomorrow morning. Getting back to round 2 for questions. These are some additional questions from the Business and Community Political Action Committee. These have been identified specifically for each one of you. So I guess, Elizabeth, you're up first on this time around, I think, aren't you?
No, I think
Oh, Brian? I see, I can't keep track.
That's all right.
Okay, let me find yours, Brian. We didn't put these in the right order. Don't worry, we're there. Okay, Brian.
Yes.
On a recent KOCT Journalist Roundtable, you spoke about your intent to bridge the gap between political parties and to work with people on both sides of the aisle. How do you plan to do that?
Well, that's a great question. You know, I believe in some regards everybody's right and everybody's wrong. There's just a lot of wrong out there, and there's a little bit of right in everything. So I think essentially we have to look at both sides of the story when we're looking at certain issues and, you know, ideas that, you know, don't necessarily go a party line to the right or to the left. But, you know, you have to gather all the facts. You know, and if you can look at the facts, gather them up, and make the best decision you can based on that, I think that's the best way that we can approach doing this. I don't see it as us against them. I see us all collaborating for a win-win, making sure that public interest is in mind rather than private interests or some agenda. I think there's a lot of opportunities to, you know, bridge not only the gaps that we see in our political parties, but culturally as well. We have a fantastic state here with all kinds of cultures, all kinds of opportunities for business, and I think that we as a state are so blended. How can we not afford to bridge these gaps and work together on all kinds of issues? Thank you.
Good. Yeah, Tom just asked me a very important question. No, each of you will get a different question. Here's yours, Tom. On your website, you state the purpose to take special interest money out of, to take special interest money out of politics. What do you define as special interests, and how do you propose to take the money out of politics?
Sure. I consider special interest to be any large corporate contribution or a large union contribution. The point is basically large contributions that move the needle from single sources. So Arizona has experimented with things like every registered voter gets a voucher for $25, let's say, and you can allocate that towards a registered candidate. whether it's just lowering the contribution limits across the board. You'll note Carlsbad and Oceanside have no limit whatsoever on local elections. So it's not just at the state or legislative level or even at the statewide level. There's a role for the state legislature to ensure that even local elections are not unduly influenced by concentrations of money. So it's ridiculous that Oceanside and Carlsbad have no limits whatsoever for city council and mayoral elections, for instance. What else can be done? Certainly more and more transparency. I support the efforts of groups like the California Clean Money Campaign to be sure that whatever money that is spent on campaigns is clearly identified, not hidden behind shadow false group names.
Phil, on your website, you state California is consistently rated to have the nation's worst business climate. Taxes, red tape, and out-of-control regulations make it too difficult for businesses to open and thrive. How would you convince the legislators on the other side of the aisle that it's time to do something to alleviate the many burdens that have been placed on businesses?
Well, I'm not Superman here, and I can't do the impossible. The fact is that our state is run by one party, and that party is being told what to do by a few gigantic, very wealthy special interests. So that's kind of what's happening, and that's why the regulations and the taxes are so high in our state, because we have a one-party rule. I don't think that works. I think it shows you over the past 20 years that has not worked in our state. And the fact is this, I guarantee you everybody in this room knows somebody, either themselves or somebody else, who's thinking about leaving our state because of the cost of living here. That's the cost of owning a business, starting a business, or just trying to get by on middle income. So, the fact is, when I go to Sacramento, I'll be a voice for lower taxes and lower regulations, and I'll point out the facts of what's happening. The middle class is being hollowed out. They're fleeing our state. This has to end. I'll be, hopefully, your representative in Sacramento to be a voice of reason. Thank you.
Thank you. Tasha, a Delmore Times article from October 13th, 2017 quotes you as saying, "I will lead on policies that empower hardworking families, fully fund our public schools, safeguard our most vulnerable populations, and protect the natural beauty of California." Unquote. Although there is a lot to unpack in that statement, what specifically is your plan to fully fund our public schools?
So when I think we look at our budget, there is a couple things that we have to look at, and I think often we look in the short term, we don't look in the long term, right? We don't look at educating a person today, what that does to our economy tomorrow. And so I believe what we need to do is bring together businesses, labor, educational institutions, and government and talk about how do we strengthen our economy. Because when we grow the pie of our economic development, we are able to have revenues that can fully fund public education. And that's a win-win for everyone. And I think when you look at the long term, fully funding public education is the best investment we can make, not only for today, but of tomorrow.
Thank you. Amanda, on your website, you claim to have good relationships with legislators on both sides of the aisle. Please give us an example of one of your accomplishments that required reaching across the aisle.
Well, as president of the San Diego County League of California Cities and the state vice president for the Mayors and Council Members Department, I go back and forth to Sacramento quite a bit, and I work on the Revenue and Taxation Policy Committee. And in that committee, there are approximately 50 to 60 people in the room from all over the state, including some of our legislators who come in to sit with us and talk about what they're proposing as far as raising taxes and the new programs they want to do. And in the beginning, when I first got there 6 years ago, I was usually the only one in the room who was advocating for reducing the taxes or not raising the taxes and looking at the other side of the ledger, where can we reduce to make up for this necessity? Because a lot of our programs are repetitive programs or they're not effective. Well, I'm happy to say now I have a lot of people in that room, after giving them examples and finding common ground, giving them examples about how these taxes negatively impact their community as well as my community. I have a lot of these relationships where we're working together in these committee hearings in Sacramento, trying to get the rest of the legislators to see that these tax increases are not beneficial. Thank you.
Elizabeth. On your website, you state, I oppose unfair taxes that plan an undue burden on young people, middle-income workers, senior citizens, veterans, small businesses. Please give an example of 2 of the unfair taxes you are referring to and how you would approach ending those taxes.
I think we already talked about one, which is the gas tax. That places a burden on every single group we just talked about. I also look a lot at the taxes that are placed on utility bills. When we have senior citizens who are on fixed incomes, or anyone with a disability, they cannot control how much more money they're getting. And when you add $5 or $10 a month to 3 or 4 bills, that can make the difference between someone being able to buy medicine or groceries or getting to their job or not. We need to take a hard look at what the cost of living is in this state and what it takes for a person to be able to survive. And when we just pass taxes and add a few dollars here and there, and the Utilities Commission does it, we see things going up on everything, we see our sales tax going up, we have to do better. We cannot just keep adding taxes to everything to pay for things without thinking about what people actually have to live on. I met a woman who was a full-time worker at Walmart who was living in her car. We need to do better.
Thank you. Now I'm going to be asking one question of all of you. Okay, so Tom, we're going to start with you. Tourism is very important to North County economy, to the North County economy. What can you do to get and keep sand on our beaches?
Get a big shovel, I guess, right? Look, I grew up for 20 years up in the Bay Area, Half Moon Bay. It's a small town, about 13,000 people between Santa Cruz and San Francisco. So I very much understand the importance of tourism to the local economy. Like I said, I've lived in Carlsbad for the last 20 years. I've lived within the 2 miles of the Pacific Ocean for 47 years. I think that you're implying that putting sand on the beach is in fact the solution. I don't think that's necessarily the solution in every case. The ocean's a big, powerful beast, and sometimes it's going to do what it wants to do. And so I would want to hope that we have honest, scientifically skilled people in the California Coastal Commission, and that they're allowed to do their job without interference, unlike more recently when, even though they've all been appointed by Governor Brown and the legislature, there was intervention there, and they fired the executive director who had been there for many, many years and was well respected. So I don't want to avoid the question, but I think what we need to do is rely on our science and on our California Coastal Commission and do the right thing both for the environment and for our tourism.
Okay, thank you.
So I think we actually need a big shovel, a really, really big shovel. Now, I agree with Thomas. The problem is with tourism, a lot of the same issues that we deal with by living here, tourists deal with the same things. And that's the fact of actually coming here and actually enjoying yourself because it costs too much. Even going out to dinner costs twice as much sometimes as you would in Arizona. They come here and rent a car and they look at their gas tax and go, eventually they're going to say, you know what, San Diego's a great place, but there are other places we can go to too. So the taxes and regulations, all these things that hurt us and hurt the middle class and people who are just trying to get by and the working poor, they also hurt people who just want to come here to enjoy the sunshine. So, the decisions made at the state level affect everybody. They really affect the most vulnerable around us, and they also affect tourism.
Thank you. I sit as one of the chairs on our Cultural Tourism Committee in Encinitas, so this topic is near and dear to my heart. And there are a couple aspects to tourism. One is the sandy beaches, and I think we, have demonstrated a lot of the coastal cities have banded together to work and get sand on our beaches, and we have to keep funding that, and we have to be working with our federal counterparts to make sure that funding still comes through, because that also prevents the erosion of our shores and our homes and our bluffs to sea level rise, and that's just the reality of climate change. And so Encinitas has one of the largest and most innovative projects called the Living Shoreline Project down in Cardiff. Go take a look, it's really exciting. And it's a way of putting sand on our beach that actually protects our sensitive infrastructure. So I think we need to be looking at sand on our beach, but we have to be looking at how do we protect our infrastructure, and we have to be supporting public art and our communities and community festivals, and we have to be looking at how do we make sure that we have affordable accommodations for visitors, because that's really what drives a lot of our industry and our tourism and our economy on the coast. So protecting our natural resources, keeping them clean and safe, and making them accessible to all visitors.
Well, I am a San Diego native, and I grew up in Imperial Beach. And I remember as a teenager watching the bulldozers and the crews come out onto the beach and actually dredge the ocean and put sand back on the beach that way. And I don't live in a coastal city now, I'm in Vista, but I do hear a lot of talk in Carlsbad and Oceanside about the beach and the erosion of the sand on the beach. And I agree that that can sometimes be a problem, not just for the humans, but also for the environment and for the critters that depend on that environment down there. So I do think that we need the Coastal Commission to work in tandem with all of the coastal communities, Encinitas, Carlsbad, Oceanside, work with those communities and with the science community to work on preserving the beaches from the erosion, as well as finding effective ways to replenish the sand on the beach. And as for tourism, I think tourism is great. It's what helps drive our economy, but we need to make it affordable for them to be here. And that's another thing that we need to work on.
Putting the sand on our beaches is something that's very important, but there's also some other things that we can consider. And I'm going to be the first one to say I am not an environmental expert, but I've been reading a lot about this. There's ways that we can talk about actually moving back a little bit. We have an issue right now with the possibility of some nuclear waste being stored on our beach. That really needs to move, by the way. The thing is, with tourism, we have an opportunity to bring income into our communities. And a lot of communities are doing great things. Oceanside, Carlsbad, Encinitas, and Vista is actually doing some great things for tourism with their arts and their revival of their downtown. Those things help us bring revenue. But we also have to think about all the people that are working at all of those businesses that we rely on tourism to support. And making sure that we have the resources to take care of the workers so they can live there and work there, so that they can actually encourage the tourism that helps fund our communities. And then work with the folks that are actually working on building up our shoreline, making sure that we preserve our resources.
Who doesn't love our beaches here in North County? I mean, geez, this is what brought myself and my wife out here. And it is kind of interesting to see that over the years, there have been many research scientists, many environmentalists that have come in and basically said some of the things that we've done in the past have actually accelerated the erosion of our beaches. So the Army Corps of Engineers came into Oceanside many, many years ago to construct something that essentially started to erode the beaches away. So I think we need to reach out to those brain trusts, those individuals, those companies, those organizations that have new solutions to really continue to have to help us have our great sandy beaches. We do not want to lose our sandy beaches. I mean, that is a tremendous tourism magnet, and we need to find ways to preserve it. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess for the next question, this will be for you, Phil. People and some organizations are using the California Environmental Quality Act, also known as CEQA, as a legislative mechanism to stop or delay good projects. It is alleged that this is an abuse of the California Environmental Quality Act, of the process. Comment.
Without getting into the weeds here, it's called CEQA, and it is absolutely. It stops a lot of good projects. It stops growth, which we need. It stops the growth of new homes. A lot of homes aren't being built because they say, well, it's against CEQA. So CEQA is one of these things. It's a policy that was put forth in Sacramento that's strangling our businesses. It's strangling the ability to build new homes, and it's making everything more expensive. It has to be reformed, and when I get to Sacramento, I'll lead the charge on reforming CEQA.
So protecting our environment, especially in a coastal district, is one of our top priorities. And CEQA, the intent behind CEQA is to do just that. But I do agree that you can see it often where it's used to delay projects. So I think what we need to do is go and look at where are the clear environmental community aspects of CEQA that we absolutely need to preserve, And where in the process can we prevent delays? Because the delays come from the local municipality, because maybe we take too long to process an application, but it also comes from the uncertainty of, do I need to do an EIR, or will I have a mitigated negative declaration? So when you look at that, there are things I think we can do to prevent delays, but still preserve CEQA and its environmental intent.
As a legislator, councilwoman, it is incumbent upon us to make sure that we are taking care of our environment. And we must all be good stewards of our environment, and I agree with that very much. And CEQA was brought together and passed with good intentions, but it absolutely has been used as a tool to not only delay projects, but to stop projects. And for sometimes very unnecessary reasons, that is a little bit of a stretch that it actually fits into the CEQA guidelines. So I do see that CEQA can be valuable because we do need to have some regulations on some of the development as far as impact on our environment. But CEQA, the way it's being used as a tool against developers, that's one of the reasons why the cost of housing in this state is so high. CEQA was one of those main reasons. And when I get to Sacramento, again, I will be fighting as hard for that as I do for the people in Vista. Thank you.
So, show of hands, how many people know what CEQA actually says or does? Okay, handful of people. One of the things that as a citizen got me interested in getting involved in government was wanting to know how things worked, why they work, and then making sure they work better for the rest of us. When government bodies meet and make decisions that affect the rest of us, we don't know about it. Oftentimes we'll hear about a bill after it's passed and then things have been put in or taken out. When projects are approved or not approved, it often happens behind closed doors. One of the things I think we really need to do is get the politics out of these issues. I mean, we need development, we need to protect our environment. Those are both good things. So why are they operating at cross purposes? It makes zero sense to me. I think that what we need to do is make sure that citizens are aware of what is happening when we have a project coming before us, and at the same time, get together and talk about what are the impacts, because oftentimes we can find common ground, and I think that's really what's most critical.
So education and informing the public of different projects is essential. I mean, CEQA, as it was, did have good intentions when it was first installed back in the 70s. It's now been hijacked, it's been manipulated to prevent a lot of development. And a lot of people in the not in my backyard movement have essentially kind of piled on with this regard for, hey, we're going to have this development in our neighborhood, it's going to bring in more homeless, it's going to bring in more traffic. Well, what we need to do is we need to work with our communities, work with our zoning boards to essentially make sure that we have intelligent planning, intelligent design, that we are protecting the environment, so that we both have the environment protected, but we also have progress and the ability for us to kind of chip away at this unaffordable housing issue that we're having right now. So my belief is that CEQA is being used by many organizations. It's being manipulated and hijacked and really just impediment for, the progress for, future development of housing. Thank you.
I very much am concerned about preserving our environment, right? It's something that we inherited from the people before us and that we will leave to the people after us. I was actually endorsed when I ran for this race in 2016 by the League of Conservation Voters. They said it was the last time they remembered a Republican even applying for the endorsement. They haven't issued one this time. So CEQA is a really good example of a couple problems. First of all, the problem that people in the legislature think that they can just write a bill and it's perfect and it's going to fit every situation. Some of the specific problems with CEQA, in addition to creating all the delays and the costs which tie into the affordable housing issue that we talked about earlier, is that there's a private course of action. So basically anybody completely unrelated to a project can sue, and then they can basically blackmail the developer and then get paid off and let the development proceed. So what we probably ought to do is ensure that if you sue to delay or to change a project under CEQA, that if there's any sort of settlement, financial settlement, that it goes into a fund for environmental remediation. It doesn't create an incentive for people just to go around like ambulance chasers.
Very good. Lindsay, you're up. They have been asking very, very good questions. She's been at the Associated Student Government, so pay attention to these guys.
The next question we would like to ask, starting with Tasha, is how do you plan to protect our natural undeveloped areas while addressing our current housing crisis?
That's a great question, because I think what it gets at is there's a catch-22 with it. I think what we really need to be doing is making sure that where we have development, we have it near transit and main transportation corridors. And, you know, as the city of Encinitas, we have funded open space acquisition, and there are ways from the state level that we can make sure that we're funding and incentivizing local municipalities to acquire open space. But I think we really need to make sure that we are following our general plans, that we are looking at making sure that the development happens near transit and transportation corridors, and making sure that we hold local municipalities accountable for that goal.
That's a great question. As a councilwoman, I know that we deal with this all the time. We want to preserve open space. That adds to the quality of life that our community has, that we need so much more of in our state. But we also have a housing crisis. We do need to build more housing. And I think it goes back to thoughtful general plan, as Tasha mentioned. It goes back to the thoughtful vision that your community has for what they want their future to be. Building as much as we can near the transit centers makes sense. That's where we're moving to these days. But we also want to talk about, when we talk about entry-level home market, there are different definitions of entry-level. Some of it is going to be apartment, some of it's going to be condominium, some of it might be a small beginning home. So we need to look at the inventory of housing that we have, what we want to have in our community, and how to most efficiently build it out so that we have the housing inventory that we need, but we have to keep in mind the green space that our community needs for quality of life. So it's a balancing act, it's a thoughtful act, and it's one worth preserving.
At the state level, we should support what communities are doing. So that's a start. Communities do have great plans. I also think that as we work to develop new areas, and I've actually had some meetings with developers, which is kind of unusual. I wouldn't normally sit down and talk with one, but I said, well, if we're going to build a new development, could we think outside of the box? Could we make sure that we have a park preserved as part of this? Could we draft a plan that includes affordable housing for necessary workers relative to what they're making, like our teachers, our nurses, our firefighters, our paramedics, our police officers? Can we do that? And this person said, wow, that's a great idea. So maybe we think forward that when we're doing something new, instead of just saying we're going to put up 200 houses here and then we're going to worry about protecting something there, that we look at it as an all-inclusive concept. At the same time, yes, having housing near transit is important. Walking cities, developing new different concepts depending on the lay of the land, because we do have a very diverse district here in the 4 cities in Camp Pendleton area. So let's work what works in the communities.
Brian, I'm going to ask you, we're going to take about a 30-second break. I'd like you all to move your chairs forward. Some of you are about to find up and wind out in the parking lot. So please move, yeah. There you go. It's a safety issue. OSHA was here. There you go. Read the question again for me, too. All right.
I'm going to take a
And again, the question is, how do you plan to protect our natural undeveloped areas while addressing our current housing crisis?
Thank you. So, you know, there's nobody that loves the outdoors than me. I love horse trails. I love riding trails. I love biking trails. It is really important for me, for my sanity, if you will, to have those green spaces to run, play, and enjoy the natural environment. There are a lot of examples, a lot of models that I've seen with developments across this county and other states that make sense to me. They have the green spaces, they're incorporating the housing, the residential apartment buildings into those concepts, and they work very well. The last thing I want to see is parking lots all over the place and no trees. And I have seen a lot of developments, whether they be townhomes or apartment buildings, with a lot of parking lots. And some of that's with regards to conserving water. But essentially what I'm seeing is that more parking lots just really put out a lot more heat in the atmosphere. So having that green space is really essential to our environment. protecting our environment and the future of how we want to play and how we want to work and what we want to be surrounded with. And I certainly do not want to be surrounded with a concrete jungle. Thank you.
The best way to preserve open space and parks, which are very important in the local community, is to let the local community plan for itself and not to have top-down housing elements and other sorts of programs pushed down from Sacramento because they're trying to figure out a way to put another 10 million, 20 million, or 50 million people in California. Right? So unless you're trying to make like another Yosemite, that might be a state issue, and let them get the land for it and figure out how to manage it, develop it, and whatnot. But what's going on right now is a bill that was just shot down in committee. It will probably come back. I believe it was SB 827, where they were going to completely gut any kind of development growth limits within a half a mile of a train station. So they could put in an 8-story building right in downtown Carlsbad Village because there happens to be a train station there. And it's just appalling. People in Sacramento treat Encinitas just like it's Mojave, one size fits all. That is not the solution. The solution is to respect local general plans, local community action plans, and hold your local officials accountable.
So I think it's going to be a unique thing today because you've heard 6 people so far, I guess 5, and me being the 6th. People who care about our environment, you care about where we live, we care about how our developments are being built, and we care about local control. I agree with all those things. Everything that was said up here, I think we all agree on, which is a good thing. You've got good people going to Sacramento, hopefully. But I want to double down on one thing that Thomas said, and that's state control. Far too often, the state does one-size-fits-all laws for the entire state. He's right. We should leave it to local control. The state, honestly, they're so out of touch. Jerry Brown and his cohorts in Sacramento are so out of touch with the average person in our state, and it shows you. It shows you by the taxes and regulations and costs of living here. He doesn't know what they're doing to our local communities. So I agree with everybody here on how we should build and how to be environmentally friendly and having open spaces, but we need to really look at the role of the state when it comes to pushing top-down regulations on everybody else.
The last question we would like to ask, starting with Amanda Rigby, is Governor Jerry Brown signed AB 19, the California Community College Promise, in 2017, allowing colleges to make the first-year tuition free for first-time, full-time California community college students. What steps will you take to collaborate with our community college in fully implementing AB 19?
I think that it's important that our community college students and my kids both went here to MiraCosta, so I appreciate the community college environment very much. I think it's important that we allow our students to have some time to figure out what they want to do. And I know that Palomar also has started a program like this a while back. And I think it's important that not only do we allow them that time, but we work with them so that they can discover what it is that they want to do so that they can have their time and the energy and the money spent wisely and efficiently for them. So whatever the resources are that the state can provide, is something that we need to work on so that we don't waste those resources. So I was a little bit hesitant when I first heard about this program because so many times programs like this have good intentions, but they're not really very effective. I would want to see what we can do to make sure that this is effective and that it works for the benefit of the students and the university.
Investing in our kids is an investment in the future. My youngest daughter actually moved up to San Francisco for a job and then had a great opportunity when she started working at the Conservatory of Flowers. She decided she wanted to take on a new career, and she's now studying floristry and permaculture free in San Francisco because they have free college there. I would like to see college offered to every single student who wants to attend, all the way through a bachelor's degree or a trade or a technical degree, and we can do this. And this is going to sound crazy because I've talked about fiscal responsibility and keeping taxes low, but I did a little research. If we did, in fact, reinstate the estate tax on the top 1/5 of 1%, which I don't know if there's any billionaires in this room, but I don't think it's any of us, we would be able to put 2.6 million kids all the way through school. I see that as a critical investment in our future because these are the folks that are going to be the innovators. These are the folks that are going to be planning for the future. Putting money in our kids is the best investment we'll ever make.
So The tuition costs across the board in many colleges have just continued to skyrocket. In fact, over the last like 10, 15 years, it's just been insurmountable in the amount of money that tuition has been, just essentially racking most students that are going to college. Back up, up until the 1960s, University of California, the tuition was free. It's shifted from basically a public good, having people go to college or a higher education, to now it's an individual, it's up to you. And if it costs as much as a $40,000 car, well, then that's what it costs. So I think the mindset and how to think really needs to shift a little bit, and I think we need to afford those who are coming up, those who are going to be taken over in the future, have an opportunity to seize on something like this, free tuition. As to how that would be paid, that's something that we really need to look into. Thank you.
Education is a critical investment in our future, but we have to keep in mind that every bit of the state budget is fungible. So if you come up with some great idea to get more revenue from something, you can't say like, well, I'm going to just take that revenue for the specific program. Every dollar that we spend, we need to balance it and compare it against any other program and figure out what's the best priority, what's the best use of our dollars. So in the higher education system, community colleges are the absolutely best value for the taxpayer dollars and for the students, right? We don't have a one-size-fits-all higher education system. People have different lifestyles. I knew people at Stanford were transfers from junior college. A lot of people can find that they can save a ton of money living at home and going to community college. It's not just young people. It's older people getting retraining, accounting, other sorts of classes. So I'm definitely in favor of shifting resources that are going to wasteful spending in the UC and even the state system towards the community college system. It's a much better use of dollars.
Yeah, I think the first thing I would do in the legislature, if I could wave a magic wand, is to take the money for the high-speed rail and put it into community colleges. We're talking billions of dollars that are going to be wasted. You'll never see this train, I promise you. It'll be like a dinosaur out there, in a fossilized dinosaur, for 50 years, and you're going to say, that's where all my money went, and it should have gone to community colleges. But that's how Sacramento thinks. They want to do everything. They not only want to build a high-speed train to nowhere, they're going to raise your taxes to make college free. You can't have it both ways. So how about this? Raise your hand if you want to get rid of the high-speed rail, right? And put it into community colleges.
So the question was about how do we make sure that we have the first-year tuition about community colleges free. And so I think, I would agree with those who have spoken that saying investing in community colleges is the best return on investment we can make from the state. That's absolutely true. I think we need to go a step further and make sure we're connecting even more than we already are doing, because MiraCosta, I think, is really at the forefront of a lot of community colleges on working with our local businesses. My intention is when I'm in the state assembly to create a task force on the jobs of tomorrow and make sure that we have MiraCosta represented, that we have our local businesses represented, that we have our trades represented, so that we have the vocational training, so we're making sure that your investment in your community college education is leading to a job. When I went to Berkeley in 1991, that's how old I am, I paid $800 a semester. It's now $15,000. That is not giving an opportunity for the future for our best and brightest. So we need to do more, and I am committed to doing more, and I will be your champion and your voice in the State Assembly on this issue.
Before I hand the mic back to David, do the candidates mind if I take a quick picture for the ASG website?
A selfie.
This is. Lindsay, you want me to take it? Sure.
Make sure you tag us.
Okay.
Who's going to get it? There you go. Okay.
Okay, all the candidates, can you see me?
Yes.
Take a count. I can see every one of you.
Can we do a funny one too?
It's your room.
Yeah,
What do you want to do?
a funny one.
A funny one?
Yeah.
Do a funny one.
How do you want to? Oh!
She's sticking her tongue out. We're this kind of stuff.
Okay, Lindsay is giving me a face, and I think she's encouraging you guys to make a funny face. This is gonna go into, this is gonna go into the news media, you gotta remember. Okay, funny face, everybody. One more. Some of you were very serious.
I wasn't serious. I was grinning.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good job. Yeah, once again, the students came through with some outstanding questions, and we sincerely appreciate that. I'm glad I didn't. You can applaud for that. That's a good thing. The rest of the time, no. Okay, this is a question we're going to do roundtable again. Everyone will get a chance to operate it. And I think I'm starting with you, Elizabeth, right? Is that right? Yeah, you're up first. All right, you ready?
Okay,
This is from the audience. This is the questions that you guys submitted to us earlier. We have 3 that we're able to get to in time-wise. If you could change one thing about the healthcare system and the Affordable Care Act, the card says Obamacare, but I prefer the Affordable Care Act, what would it be now and in the future? If you could change one thing, what would it be now and in the future to change?
Okay. Real fast. I'd replace it with Medicare for all. Woo, easy. How fast is that? Okay. It's going to save us money. It's going to save businesses money. It's going to save consumers money. It's going to save us all money, and it's going to give us all health care. It's going to basically take a working model, improve on it, expand it, save us a fortune, and give us healthier people.
So I would basically say that, I'd remove a lot of the liabilities that doctors have right now, give them the tools essentially to continue to do their business. They're being overrun by all kinds of taxes and fees and all kinds of things within this state. I think we need to give them the opportunity to remove those burdens and make it easier on everybody to make their payments and to go see their doctor.
Well, I'll give you a federal question answer and a state answer, right? I would eliminate the barriers for cross-state policies. So, for instance, I was a COO at a company. We had offices in Philadelphia, Boston, San Francisco, and we had to get like 3 different policies for our employees, some of whom traveled back and forth or who were temporarily out of state but left their spouses and children in state. So that is a huge cost because each insurance company has to maintain infrastructure and follow all the regulations for the 50 different states. So I think that would make things more efficient. But I think the biggest problem, the thing that people want is they want to get away from pre-existing conditions. But on the other hand, they want things cheap because it's like, you're using the internet. You want everything for free, right? You can't just not have insurance for 20 years and then get sick and say, well, I'm just going to start paying for insurance now. So somehow we have to figure out a way to get kids on insurance and stay on insurance all the way through their lives so that they're not cherry picking and just deciding to get insurance when they're sick because that makes it more expensive for all of us. How to do that? I'm not so sure.
So you remember when President Obama said you can keep your plan and keep your doctor? It wasn't true. I had the same doctor, my family doctor, for 38 years. And when Obamacare came into play, I lost my doctor. It wasn't covered anymore. So I couldn't go to the same doctor who's seen me since I was about 10 years old. And I thought that was wrong. And then when I chose a new doctor, the fees were astronomical and the costs were prohibitive. And I said, this can't be the right way. Medicare for all, in fact, is just another top-down way of telling the state to tell us what to do and to keep us, put us in between a doctor and the patient. I believe in having that doctor-patient relationship is so important. I don't want government telling me to do that. So the answer is similar to what Thomas said. Increase competition across state lines. Competition does great things. It reduces the cost and increases the quality. And also, tort reform is critical too. Thank you.
So long term, I support any plan that gets us to a high quality, more affordable healthcare system for everyone. But in short term, we have really critical issues. Medi-Cal is significantly underfunded. That means services like Planned Parenthood are underfunded. I have a friend and a neighbor who lives nearby, and he's 6 months older than me. And he has dialysis, or has 5th stage kidney failure from untreated diabetes, and he has to go on dialysis. He's on Medi-Cal because he can't work. And so he can't find anywhere in North County to go to the doctor. because Medi-Cal is so underfunded, it's not being provided. So there are critical places immediately where our dollars are best spent making sure that the very most vulnerable among us have access to health care. Thank you.
In looking at the Affordable Care Act, some of the things that I've experienced personally that I would like to see changed kind of echo what we've already heard. I was told I could no longer see my doctor in Rancho Bernardo because he was too far away. So that's ridiculous. I don't need somebody from Washington, D.C. telling me that Rancho Bernardo is too far for me to go to see a doctor. It's none of their business how far I'm willing to drive to see the doctor that I need to see. So I would say stop with the telling me that I can see my doctor when I really can't. We need to get government out of healthcare as far as between the doctor and their patient. And also drop the boundaries as far as crossing state lines. Let the free market work in this industry as much as possible. Get government out of the relationship between the doctor and the patient. Those are some of the changes that I would like to see made to it. And as well as keeping health care for everybody that we possibly can as affordable as possible with those changes.
Could I say something really fast since I spoke quickly and didn't use my whole time? Real fast. I just want to correct something. Mr. Graham said that the Medicare for All would actually get in the way of a doctor-patient relationship, and everyone's talked about the costs of big government being involved. Private insurance managing our health care, all of the Romney Care model that was in Massachusetts, that's what's costing us money. Medicare for All does not affect your doctor-patient relationship.
Sorry.
You can see anybody you want.
Okay, we're good. Here's another one. Do you agree or disagree with a famous statement made by the United States President Calvin Coolidge? I know I was around, but I don't think any of you were. This business of America is business. How do we get back to that philosophy? And I think that would be you, Brian. How do we get back to that philosophy?
Wow, the whole foundation of our, we're the empire that has built business, capitalism, and here it is, we're struggling. We're having more businesses out on the battlefield, pounding the pavement every day, trying to make ends meet, trying to get over that hump. And, here it is, we're struggling in this country. I think we really need to have the support of, not only our central, government in Washington, D.C., give us those tax breaks across the business line, but we also need to have the state support our businesses, and they're not doing that. I look at this administration right now, they've dropped the corporate tax from 35% down to 21%, and yet this state is going to add an additional percentage on top of the state tax for most businesses. Why is that? What is the threat here associated with business here in this state? I would like to see this state in line with everybody else and giving everybody a hand up rather than a hand out.
Anybody who's run a business knows that if you want to make a paradigm shift like that, you're really talking about changing the culture of a business, or in this case, the culture of a state or the culture of the government. America was founded on ingenuity, right? And the ability, once people came up with a good idea, they could run with it. And they could bring people in as employees and build a business. That required a certain amount of trust between the employees and the business owners. And I think we have, unfortunately, in this country right now, in this state, too much divisiveness. And we need to figure out a way. A lot of businesses are approaching things with what they call the triple bottom line. It's their dollars, right? It's their employees, and it's their stakeholders, which include the customers. And we need to do that. And Sacramento is not doing that. Sacramento is treating business like it's the golden goose they're trying to strangulate and get that one last egg out of it, right? And leave nothing for the next generation. Businesses do have an obligation to you and to us and to all of us to help make this a better state and a better environment. But we also have to have a little bit of trust, and we need to work together cooperatively, not divisively.
So I've worked in the private sector for 25 years. I've worked for some of the largest companies in the world, companies like General Electric and Sony Electronics. And what I've done with each of these companies, I've helped them innovate by using technology and other innovative ways to grow their businesses, be more efficient, and also create new jobs. And what I find with government is they always tend to want to just grow more. The answer to any problem with government is more government. and more taxes. One thing I hate more than anything, other than inefficiency, is bureaucracy. It stifles innovation. It costs tax dollars. And that's what a big government does. The fact is, the biggest bureaucracy in our country is our federal government. And our state government's the same way. They continue to grow year after year after year, which means we have to pay more in tax dollars to help that bureaucracy grow. When I get to Sacramento, I'll work on shrinking the size of the state government and improving the lives of business owners and people who want to start businesses.
So I think it's important to remember that we're the 6th largest economy in the world in California. We are the leaders in innovation here. And what we need to have is somebody who has a business mindset, who represents the values of our district, which are sustainability, opportunity, prosperity, and equality. In Sacramento, working with the Assembly majority to make sure that we are making sure that we advance innovation and keep that innovative mindset going. I have worked in my career, I've started businesses, I have run a small business, I've had employees, I've worked with the World Health Organization to eradicate neglected diseases, I've helped train sustainable entrepreneurs in Latin America, I've worked for global Fortune 500 companies, and I've led marketing teams in the higher education sector. I have a wide breadth of experience, and taking that to Sacramento will be the first step in making sure that we stay the 6th largest economy in the world.
Any good business person always remembers they begin their day, they end their day, remembering who they work for. Their customers. That's who they work for. Part of the problem that we have in California's legislature right now is that they have forgotten who they work for. They forgot that they work for us. They think they work for the special interest groups that are lobbying up there 24/7, literally 24/7. So it's important that we bring back the thought of business and customer service to our constituents, to our state. And as your Assemblywoman in Sacramento, I will never forget that I work for the people, and it's your best interest that will be my best interest as well. I will keep that in the forefront, and I will work to get rid of a lot of the special interests up there that are not in your best interest. I will remember is the business of the people that's being done up there.
When the question was originally posed, there was this nostalgic approach to what America started out to be. And I actually tend to agree, because when things were doing well in this country, we had things like antitrust laws. We had things like usury laws. We were protected from the global big banks that swallowed up every single small community bank that I can think of, the pharmaceutical companies that swallowed up every single small neighborhood pharmacy, the global corporate interests that essentially have created a problem for our small businesses. We've got big box stores where once we had the neighborhood supermarket or the neighborhood bookstore or the neighborhood clothing retailer. When we talk about business, let's be clear what we're talking about. Big business, small business. For our California-based businesses, absolutely, we should do everything we can to encourage innovation, but we also have to stop and think what it's costing us for the lobbyists, for the lawyers who are supporting, the intellectual property protections, which are often held by foreign corporations. It's about taking care of California, and I would be honored to be able to do that for you up in Sacramento. I taught a course in common sense economics. I'd be happy to talk about it with anybody.
Good, okay. Tom, this is our last question from the audience, and then we have some more little questions to ask you. What do you propose to help California get back to having one of the best education systems in the country? Please be specific.
Sure. I saw an interview with Tim Cook, CEO of Apple, recently. He talked about going to China not because of lower costs, because the available of labor trained specifically in tooling. So this would be an example of like the vocational training. So what I think we need to do is, again, as an ongoing theme, is to create opportunities for people to make the choices that are best for them in their lives, not to dump on you the expectation that you're not going to be a success unless you go to, say, a 4-year residential college. That may or may not be true for you in your life or your siblings, right, or your friends. And In order to compete around the world right now with robotics and a lot of the other innovations that are taking place that are really driving the best parts of our economy, we require more and more vocational training in metalworking and circuit boards and other electronics and robotics. And so we need to have those sorts of classes available at the community college level, some tailored 4-year degree programs like we have with biotech here at MiraCosta, and that's what I would do.
Yeah, there are two things I would do. I would reform the UC system so that it's more affordable for people who can actually get and afford classes in the UC system. The bureaucracy in the UC system is actually out of control. It needs to be reformed. And the second thing is make sure there are schools who are actually teaching things that people can use. I mean, please don't go take a class that you'll never use in the future in a real job. I mean, STEM courses are critical. I mean, the jobs of the future are STEM jobs. So please focus on those, and I think that's where our colleges should be focusing.
So I believe the question, correct me if I'm wrong, is what am I going to do to make sure that we have the best educational system in the world, right?
You're correct.
So the first thing we do is we have to fully fund public education. We don't fully fund it. We use Prop 98 money as our ceiling, not our floor. And that means from the very beginning, we're not giving the kids the education they need. So the first thing is we need to fully fund public education. The second thing is we have to train more vocational jobs. I have a friend who works for a large biotech here. He's the VP of marketing. And he said, we have 6,000 jobs that are going unfulfilled because we don't have folks trained up for them. And I said, please don't bring 6,000 people to North County. We have no place to house them. But let's talk about how we get to that future. So we need to make sure we're training the workforce of the future. And some of those jobs are trades and vocational. Some of them will be more academic. And I think the third aspect is we are not investing enough in women. And we have to do better. So we need to make sure that we are targeting more programs, STEM programs, specifically to narrow that gender gap so that we are being the innovation economy that we have always been and what we can be in the future.
When we talk about how we can improve the education system, and I think what we're talking about is secondary education, you have to look at what is it that we think makes it a success. And I think the definition that we've heard, not just tonight, but in the news recently when we've talked about this, is we're talking about making sure that when our young people graduate from college, that they have a job. And I know a lot of young people right now who've graduated from college and still cannot find a job. So we need to make sure that we are educating them in the field with the classes that they need to give them the knowledge that they need to get into the workforce. But in my city, what we do, in addition to working with our school district, we go through our business park and our business centers, and we go door to door and we talk with our business owners to find out what can we do to help them. And we hear a lot of them say, again, they don't have enough people in the trade to work their business. We have some businesses with a lot of job openings. So we went back to the school district and we worked with them to open a trade school. So we need to work in tandem with the school district, with the community colleges, the universities to identify what will best suit our young people as well as our business industries.
When we talk about education, it needs to begin earlier. California is one of the few states that does not have kindergarten as a mandatory starting point. I believe we need to start early. Statistics have shown that when we have kids starting with preschool or kindergarten, they are more likely to go on to college or trade school or a technical training or something. They're going to be more successful in life. So I think we need to actually start looking at earlier education for our kids, not just waiting until they're ready to go to college and then saying, what are you going to major in? That's a big thing. Second thing is making sure that we fully fund our public schools. We need to invest in our kids, we need to invest in our teachers, and we need to take the schools that aren't performing and instead of punishing them, actually give them more resources so they can take care of those kids that are at risk. Finally, when we get to colleges, we need to make college free. And I don't mean free like it's a skating thing. No, we are going to fund it, but kids should not graduate from college with a mountain of crushing debt so they can never buy a home and never have a future.
You know, innovation is key to the progress of our state. It's a key to the progress of our communities. And what we've seen with regards to standardization of education is really failing us now because technology and the future is here. And industry is calling out for those skill sets to incorporate into their industry, and it's just not there. So what we really need to do is we need to look at customizing curriculums for certain skill sets, for the type of character, the individual who is going to want to go into the workforce and work in a technology area or work somewhere else. But we need to break away from the standardization with regards to education and customize it more to the individual. More and more industry is now looking into how they're going to help schools, how they're going to help individuals kind of usher them in to their industry. I think that's a great way to really take a look, peek behind that curtain. Industry has the keys to this, and I think we need to work hand in glove with them. Thank you.
Great. Now we have one more question for y'all. I guess we're starting with you, Tom, right? Again? Or did you answer the? I started last. You did. Go, Phil, you ready? Yeah. What question would you like to, as your final question, what question do you wish we'd ask you?
Well, that's a good question. What would I want to be asked? Let me think. This is going to be fun, actually. I think I would like to be asked, and what's in your background makes you the right person to be your representative in Sacramento? And the answer is, like I said, I'm a San Diego native. I come from the tech and biotech background. I'm not new to politics, actually. My first job in politics, I was an intern for Ronald Reagan. That shows you how old I was. But I've been blessed and honored to have the endorsements of a number of leaders across our state, including Kevin McCarthy, probably our next Speaker of the House, to former leaders in this seat, Martin Garrick and Mark Weiland, the mayor of San Diego, Kevin Faulconer, Carl DeMaio, so leaders across the state. And also, I was the only person on this stage endorsed by the San Diego Republican Party of the county. So, it's been my background, like I said, I don't come from government, I come from business, and I truly believe that our state is broken and we need more business-minded solutions in Sacramento.
So I wish somebody had asked the question about women. What are we going to do to narrow the pay gap? What are we going to do to raise up women so we're not earning X cents on the dollar? Because there is something we could do in Sacramento. Women are the potential and the talent of the workforce of the future. And making sure that we have equal opportunities in business, in education, that we're being encouraged just as much as our male counterparts in math and science. These are the things that will make our communities and our regions strong and resilient for the future. I am honored to have been endorsed by Emily's List, the National Women's Political Caucus, and Planned Parenthood Action Fund of the Pacific Southwest. I will stand up for women and our next generation, from our little girls until our senior women, and make sure that we have the gender equity that we deserve and our economy demands. Thank you very much.
Well, I wish someone had just come right out and asked each of us, what are our top 3 priorities when we get to Sacramento? Right now, we're looking, as we've already talked about, a housing crisis. So we need to look at what's causing the housing crisis, all of the details of it, and what can we do to fix it. That goes in tandem with the homeless crisis that we are having. And one of our state legislatures called the crisis of homelessness in this state a humanitarian crisis. That's an indicator that that's a top priority that we need to address. What's causing it? What can we do to fix it? And the third thing is, why do we have so many businesses and residents fleeing California? Senator Bell commented to me in a meeting a couple of months ago in Sacramento that it was a mass exodus from California of residents and of businesses. We need to look at why that is and fix it so that we can keep our people here and bring in more businesses to California. I'm a wife, I'm a mother, I know what it takes to raise a family in California, and I see how it's getting harder every day. As your next Assemblywoman, I will fight for every family in the 76th District.
I wish someone had just asked me, what are you going to do to make my life better? Because that's really why we're here, right? That's the only reason we're here. It's not about us. You want to read about me, I have a website. Read all you want. You can know about my whole background, everybody that endorsed me and thinks I'm nifty. The thing is, it's about you and what someone is there to do for you. When you elect someone to represent you, that person is supposed to be your voice in Sacramento, not their own, yours. What I want to do is listen to you. When a piece of legislation comes before the assembly, I will hold a video town hall if I can't come down to the district and let people know exactly what's going on. The goal here is to make sure that we all have a better quality of life, that our communities are stronger, that our kids are going to do better, and that we're going to have a healthier California and a planet in the future, because that's really what it comes down to. And I am the person who will be accountable to you 100% of the time. I will be happy to discuss qualifications anytime, but it's about accountability, and I promise you that.
Well, there's so much to look forward to. And one of the things that I wish I would be asked would be, what would you do to recruit industry? What would you do to keep the talent, the skill sets from leaving the state? You know, in the industry that I'm in a high-tech field, and I'm seeing a constant turnstile of individuals that come into the state and they're like, you know what, I don't know if this is going to work out for me. The living standards, the quality of life, it's not necessarily what I expected. The costs are so overwhelming for most people that they're looking to go to Arizona, they're looking to go to Texas, they're looking to go to Oregon. This is really unfortunate. We should be doing everything in our power to keep business here, to keep the industry from leaving, and I would do everything in my power to make sure that we recruit those individuals to stay here, reduce that tax burden on industry and individuals. Thank you.
The question I wish I was asked was, what's wrong with government and how are you going to fix it, right? We've been to the moon. We've made incredible discoveries in medicine. We can transplant organs, right? Incredible innovations in technology and transportation. But everybody seems to be so pissed off at government and so dissatisfied with government. And we ask ourselves, well, what is the problem? Well, the problem is it's not accountable to us. If it's accountable to anybody, it's accountable to what I call the two-party mafia, right? With all the gerrymandering and the special interests, it's not accountable to us. It's one reason why I was endorsed by the San Diego County Libertarian Party and the Veterans Party of America, because I'm going to go to Sacramento with common sense and accountability to you, and that's what it lacks the most. So a little bit with my background. My mom got divorced and remarried when I was about 5 and 6. My mother is self-described as a bleeding heart labor Democrat from Dearborn, Michigan, the world headquarters of Ford Motor Company. My father was a Wall Street Republican, and my stepfather was a libertarian. Right? So since I was 6 years old, I've been told 3 different versions of how the world works, and knowing all the time that at least 2 of the people I loved and respected the most were either wrong, confused, or lying to me. Right? I don't have the benefit of believing in fantasies. I know how things work, and I will go and find people on all sides of the political spectrum and focus on common sense for your benefit.
Great. I think we should give all of them a big round of applause. Thank you very, very much. Great. And also, thanks. Sorry we didn't get to all the questions, but we're just rapidly running out of time here. One question for you in the audience. Has anybody changed their mind about who they're going to be vote for? And this is going to be in the primary. Remember, June the 5th. Vote June the 5th. Because you got the information here. It was great information. Outstanding work. Thank you all. It was really, really great. Scott, I'm turning it over.
All right, thank you, everyone. How about a big round of applause for our moderators, David and Lindsay. And again, thank you to all of our candidates for being here this evening. One more round of applause for our candidates. I also want to thank our host, MiraCosta College, Kristen Hike, and also the Associated Student Government. Thank you all. Our sponsor this evening, Genentech. And all of our co-hosts, the Oceanside Chamber Business and Community Political Action Committee, the Vista Chamber of Commerce, Carlsbad Chamber, Encinitas Chamber, and Fallbrook Chamber. And thank you to our audience for taking time out of your schedule to be here tonight and for the questions and just for caring enough to take time to come meet our candidates. And again, thank you everyone. And just one final housekeeping issue, if the candidates could please pick up your materials on the way out. Thank you again, everyone.